This is White Willow Level 1, Class Number 6, Walking. Charlie Chaplin's iconic tramp walk was not just a comedic convention. It was also a social commentary on the class divide between the immigrants and the American educated elite. He exaggerated the walk of the European peasants, the wops without papers, and put it on the screen for an easy mocking laugh. The funny thing is, the walk of the poor was healthier than the walk of the educated. You see, the modern science of walking is based on class and racist premises and not empirical observation. The fashion of science is to walk with your feet straight so that you can walk on high heels. And this was created by European aristocrats to separate themselves from how the peasants walked up the fields and the mountains. But when we look at nature, nature walks on the edge to the arch and keeps an even line with the hips, and this allows for an easy weight transference. Whereas the modern Westerner walks with a mixed gait. Their foot does double actions and adds harmful effects. So if we look at the diagram for the walking, this that I call the science of hip arthritis, is we clearly see how the hip in a Western walk moves in very unstable fashion, a predictable unstable fashion, but nonetheless this causes tissue abrasions and the calluses within the joints. When we look at the science of knee arthritis, we can look at an impact for a running stride where that little blip, that little downward blip, causes rotations and torsions and shearing forces through the knee. So the modern way of Western walking, based only on fashion, is the major reason why we have so many joint problems in the ankles, knees, hips, and back. The native walker begins with their feet outward pointing. The native walker moves from the rear and lands his foot from the heel edge across through the arch ball. This propels him naturally forward even while running. So our next drill is introducing you to what we call the T-step. And we're going to be using this T-step drill to teach you how to shift your weight dynamically and fluidly like a natural walker. So the first thing is that I'm going to take my left foot and turn it outward 45 degrees. Then I'm going to take my right foot and place it into the arch of the foot so that it is moving forward along the line that we're going to walk. So the trailing foot is the one that is 45 degrees and has a foot in the arch. And the lead foot is the foot that is in the arch, and it is also what we call the designating foot. Now by designating, I mean that this right foot, since it is in the arch, is a right T-step. Now T stands for tiger, at least in the English way of speaking. So our drill is going to be, I take my T-step, my right foot, and I rotate it outward 45 degrees. Now this will create the letter T, not to be confused with a T-step. So From the letter T, we're going to use our glute and we're going to shift our weight forward by displacing the pelvis. So if I take my buttocks and do the swing theory and pushing down into the heel, you'll see my pelvis moves forward. And as my pelvis moves forward, my center of gravity shifts. Now I'm keeping this front knee straight. So this is a straight-legged move using just the ankle and the hip, well, I should say the pelvis. And as the pelvis moves forward, the weight shifts. It requires no muscular action. You just rotate your pelvis down, your weight shifts. Now, once that occurs, we take this foot and place it into the arch, into a T-step. Again, this doesn't require a lot of movement. No swinging of the legs. It just moves from point A, slides along into the arch. Now we are in a left T-step. Pivot the foot outward 45 degrees, displace the glute, pelvis moves forward, and we step. Pivot, displace, step. Pivot, displace, step. And from the front, pivot, displace, step, pivot, displace, step, pivot, displace, step. Now practice this exercise moving up and down your hallways till it becomes simple. In other words, don't use your muscles. Just try to do your swinging of your pelvis and the displacement of your pelvis to simply shift the weight. Fundamental principle. Whenever you shift, displace your pelvis, place your pelvis over your foot, the weight has shifted. It does not matter the distance. As soon as I put my pelvis over my foot, again, moving from the rear, the weight is shifted. I put my pelvis over this foot, the weight is shifted. It's not about muscle. It's about placing your pelvis over your foot. And that is the way you shift your weight.
Natural walking form follows function and the principles of the anatomical trains. So when you are bearing weight on your head, the principles that we learned in the T-step drill of how to displace and move from the rear so we transition on that edge to the arch gives us a nice steady flow across the surface. The outward rotation stabilizes us with the lateral lines. So thus all we need to do is lean back, and the weight of what we are carrying on our head drives us forward. So no energy is required. The mass moves us.
Now, walking naturally is one of those things that is actually easier to do than to speak about. But to try to understand some of the principles, we're going to use the bones here. When our feet are parallel to each other, you can see that the femurs angle inward. Now, when we do our attention position, we take those femurs and we line them up. So we bring this bone, which we call the trochanter, and by turning that at a 45-degree angle, we now place this bone perpendicular to the ground. And by placing that bone perpendicular to the ground, you'll feel this little push upwards. So now you're in a stable position. And it's an easy position to bear weight. Now, the problem with modern thinking is that in modern thinking, they believe that you walk with the muscles. And in native thinking, you believe you move with the bones. So, as we've already demonstrated with people carrying weight on their head, the natural person walks on a center line. So they keep their center aligned. They walk with their foot outwardly rotated. And in that process, they displace, just like we were doing in the T-step, their weight forward. So if you have weight on your head and you lean back, suddenly the weight is shifting. And then you step. If you keep pushing down, your foot will go out. If you keep pushing down, your foot will go out. So the native walker walks that straight line like this. The Western walker lumbers side to side. And that crossing, as we take the momentum here, we have to stop this mass momentum. And as we stop that mass momentum, all these muscles have to twist back. And then we have to twist to stop. Okay? So, because we've mastered this crappy movement, we don't notice it. But once you start walking where you just lean back and go, it'll be pretty fun. But don't do the Charlie Chaplin, because then you'll get laughed at. Our next principle is going down to go up. And what I mean by that is, we get back to the swing theory, very first day, is that when we sit and we roll the glutes downward, this naturally straightens the knees. So when the pubis goes back, we sit, the rolling down straightens the legs. Now when we were talking about our T-step, we were talking about pivoting and displacing. And that displacing is the same action, only the front knee is staying straight. So it moves the pelvis forward. So in our natural walking then, we're using the displacement aspect, plus we're allowing the leg to bend a little bit. Now, we're going to combine this together in our next exercise. And where we were moving our last exercise, where the raising the lotus, we bring this down, we turn this in, and we push up, and this resets us. So this action sits, this action twists, and as you'll notice, it starts to roll the glutes down, and as the elbows come forward, they straighten us up, and then we terminate that. So as we go with the rising lotus, this is the way that works. So we are using the hand actions to create the swing theory, the going down to straighten our legs up. So we're going to take this same exercise, and this time we're going to work it to bring on our, when we come down, before we come up, when we come back up, we're going to take our heels and bring them together into the attention position. And now is the tricky part. We've been going down with our palms equally weighted. And I mean, the pressure is the same. So we sit back nicely. What we're going to do this time is we're going to emphasize, in this case, the right palm, and we're going to put a little more heel pressure here. Now what that does, and you can see, as I go down, it shifts my pelvis and centers it over this foot. Now you'll notice that this leg actually kind of comes off the ground, because as this pelvis shifts, it lifts this part of my pelvis upward. I'm deliberately keeping my leg loose so that my toe remains on the ground. The general impression would be as you push down here, this foot would want to come off the ground. Okay, so we're not going to work with that yet. We just want to be able to distinguish the shift. Now, as I come down and change my angle, now you start to see that this is now moving forward and it elevates onto my toe. If I continue to push those elbows forward, it's going to straighten this leg. Now in this exercise, I want you to keep this knee bent so that when that leg straightens, the supporting leg straightens, it raises your foot off the ground. And it keeps it here, it's not up here. And then, as we come down, we change the shift to here. We get this pop, set, lift. Then change the palm pressure, brings you across. Set, lift. Palm pressure, set, lift. So we're doing this action with the bones. So in this exercise then, just think about it, we start off from a rising lotus. Then we bring the heels together, change the palm pressure to the right so the body shifts, set, lift, sit to the other side, shift, set, lift. Try to let the arms moving. So we're bringing heel to heel together, keeping this angled foot, because that's keeping our trochanter set. Now, we call this the stork stands on one leg, which will make sense when we go to our next exercise. Eventually, the changing of the hand pressure becomes very subtle. And there we go. So the most important lesson you can learn in this class is how to go up and down stairs. And normally, people will go downstairs in the same way that they walk. They will step out, their hip will bump, they'll step down this way, their hip will bump, and then this way. Now, all you have to see is that each time I step, I am putting a shearing force through my knee and my hip. And that is where we do the damage on our body. Now, remember, when we talk about running, people will say that each stride that you do is about 10 times your weight. Well, imagine what a step is. Okay, when you come down and you impact this, you maybe have 10 times your weight. That's cutting right through your knee. Is it any wonder why people then have pain going up and down stairs? Not to mention that all this tissue here is going to twist and tighten and brace to protect you. So each time you go up and down the stairs, you're locking up these tissues even more, and when they lock up, they pull that joint tighter, and then that becomes a normal routine. So with every step you take, you're actually hurting yourself more. Not to mention when you go up and down the steps. So we're going to apply our principles to this that we said that we do for walking. First, center line. Step on your center line. Find the center line and we place the heel over this. Now, remember what I said before, is that as you put your pelvis over your foot, the weight shifts in the air. So there's not going to be any impact because my center of gravity is now over my foot. My foot is outwardly rotated, which takes away the stress from the knee. So all I have to do is glide down the steps. Kind of easy. Show you again. Now, just to make this specific, looking at it on this angle, here's the center line. We bring the center line over. As soon as my pelvis is over the edge of the step, so we have to lead with the pubis, we've impacted it. So we glide on down. Very stable. Now, on the going up part, let's again go the normal way that people do it, is they step and then they do a one-legged knee bend. Okay, so what you're doing here is you're working out your quadriceps really well. But again, you're shearing through your knee. So that's not going to work. You can feel the pain in that when you're doing that. So people are just hurting. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to use our bones to do the work. Try to do it on this angle. So once again, instead of stepping laterally, we bring the foot so it's on our center line. So here's my foot, center line. Then, if I use my swing theory, I push. And as we've already taught you now, is that when you press down with the glute into your foot, not only will your weight shift, but it will straighten your leg. So the simple act here brings my leg up. And as we practice with our walking, it swings the next foot into position. So we're using swing theory to go up and down. We're staying on our center line to avoid all the different twists, and we're just gliding down the stairs.
Now this video presents a lot of complex technique, and it can't possibly be done perfectly. So we have some principles that you should always remember when you're walking. And the principles of natural walking are, first and foremost, always keep your feet outwardly rotated, not beyond 45 degrees, to stabilize your joints. Secondly, your heels, or the balls of your feet on the stairway, should land on your center line. Move from the rear, displacing your pelvis forward. If you can only do these three things, you will find a greater ease in your life and less tension in your joints. Remember, most of all, that walking is a process. You learn to walk by imitating your parents and others around you. And learning that method was burned into your brain before you had any thought processes. So this will be difficult. You have to overcome pre-verbal habits of your motor system. And that will take practice. And it will take literally baby steps. So just remember to try to use these principles, and that they in themselves will teach you how to walk, and that they will remove all the tension and adhesions in your muscles that have caused you any pain or discomfort. So take your time.